Well, it's really nice to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. A few years ago, I was in my home here in California, and the phone rang, and it was Tonio, an inmate, and he was asking for help. He told me he was just been convicted of murder. He was in a Mexico City prison, and I chose to believe what he was telling me. I chose to trust Tonio. And it's really difficult to do that because you're getting a call from a prison. And so I was faced with deciding whether to trust him or to trust the system that convicted him. And this data helped me make a decision. This is, every dot here represents a country in the world. And the y-axis shows the effectiveness of the criminal justice system, and the x-axis shows country wealth. And so the higher up you are, the better justice system you have, and the richer you are as you move to the right. And as you can see, Mexico is way down here, below most Asian nations, below most Latin American nations, basically below every country in the world. So I chose to believe Tonio, and I thought, well, what am I going to do to help him out of the prison system? And I thought, well, I can rent a helicopter, fly over the prison, or blow a hole in the prison walls and, get him along with a few other inmates, or hide him in a laundry cart, like they did with Chapo Guzman, or make a documentary film, and that's what we did. This is my daughter Marjan, who's sitting somewhere in the audience, holding the Mayahuel de Plata at the Guadalajara Film Festival, where we won the top documentary award, and Layda Negrete, with whom I made the film, and myself. And this is my daughter Emiliana, with the Emmy. And so, although I have plenty to say about how to make documentary films, I'm not here to talk about that. We had enormous success, and it was very unexpected. But what I'm here to talk about is, how do you know that an inmate who calls you is innocent? How do you, that's the first thing you need to know. And how often does this happen? And so the answer I have to that question is going to be kind of unsettling, because I did no DNA testing or anything like that. What I think you can do is actually ask the inmates. And I recently implemented that idea. We drew up a random sample of 950 inmates, and we went to Mexico City, and we asked them that question: are you innocent of the crime of which you were accused? And this is the responses we got. We did this for 2 periods, 2008 and 2012. Are you innocent? And this is the percentage who said yes in Mexico City. And as you can see, in 2008, 55% of the inmates said that they were convicted in spite of being innocent, and the number went up to 67%. And I bet, when you think about asking the inmates, the general prejudice we'll have is everybody's going to tell us they're innocent. Well, if that were the case, the bars, both of them would be 100%. And if we look at the court infrastructure, maybe that helps us understand why are there so many innocents imprisoned in Mexico. This is a courtroom. This is courtroom 26, where Tonio was tried. As you can see, it's a guilt presumptive structure. He stands behind bars. And that's the courtroom from the outside. And as you can see, the judge is way in the back there, and he cannot be listening to him. So that's, a really error-prone way to try people. And then I started wondering, is this the way all courts work in Mexico, or are there some courts that work better than others? And we deployed a survey to another state, a contiguous state, a horseshoe state that is around Mexico City. It's the second most populous state in Mexico, and we asked, the same question: are you innocent? And this is the percent who said yes. In 2008, 66% of the inmates in Mexico State, or Estado de Mexico, said they were innocent, and that number went down to 43%. So that's a huge decrease, and justice is, being served better in Mexico State. And this is the reason why. These are the new courts in Mexico State. You can see that it's completely changed. There's room for the public to sit down. There's a chair for the judge to be present. There's microphones there for the lawyers. Another view of the court infrastructure. So that has an impact, and not everything is looking like we saw in my film. And this is, how both trends look like. Mexico State reducing innocence, Mexico City on the rise. But other things have changed too. This is astonishing. We asked the inmates, was the judge present in your trial? And in Mexico State, that number has gone up from 7% to 81% after the new court system was built. In Mexico City, which has not done any changes, there's no change also in the number of judges present. And my favorite finding is this one. We asked the inmates whether the judge clearly explained why they were convicted. And if you see the red line, you see the yes responses. So that number went from 13% to 60%. So there's now 60% of inmates who say, yes, the judge clearly explained why I was convicted, and there's no change in Mexico City. And this is astonishing to me because it's inmates evaluating positively the judge who sent them to prison. So we can trust inmates to tell us whether the judge was present. We can trust them to tell us, whether the verdict was clear. We can trust them to tell us whether they're innocent. And, yesterday, as I was coming back from Mexico City, I got stopped at the San Francisco airport and sent to secondary inspection. And I arrived at 10 a.m., and I spent 3 hours in secondary inspection. And I got the most abusive questioning I've ever had crossing the border into the United States. And so when I finally emerged, all with a lot of adrenaline and really worried. I remember I told the officer, you have to let me go because I have to give a TED talk. and I thought, that's going to work. And he was like, what the hell is a TED talk? Well, I finally was let go. And I wanted to complain, so I went to the supervisor and I said, I want to complain about this officer. He's been really abusive. He's mistreated everybody in secondary inspection. And so he gave me a form. And I looked at the form, and it was a survey questionnaire. And nowhere in the form could you say anything bad about the officers. You could not enter the name of the officer who interrogated you or the badge number. You could not even enter the name of the airport where the incident happened. So if a system doesn't trust its users to tell them what's going on, a system cannot learn anything. And I think we can learn from the inmates. We can learn from the travelers who go through airports. Now, this is the poster of our film when it was released theatrically in Mexico. And I just want to share how well it did. It went, from being really low in the charts to making it to the top 10 for viewership. And as you can see, it's the only Mexican film. This is the top 10. You can see, all American films. It's the only documentary film that was up there. And you can see it competing with Black Swan and The King's Speech, which were nominated to the Oscars. And this is a chart of how the viewership was moving to see this film. The film was censored at the third week when it was exhibited, and that created a huge increase in the number of people who went to see it. And I think we got lucky with that censorship, and some people say that's what we owe the success of the film. But I really believe that we owe the success of the film to this. We placed a camera and a microphone in front of an inmate, and we let him tell us his story. And we can't do that for everybody. We can't tape every inmate, but we do have the ability to deploy a survey and to ask a question and to ask them how the justice system is treating them. And we can learn a lot from that. And so if If we trust that lesson, if we believe that lesson, then we have to remember that even though Mexico is making great changes, and even though the courts I showed in my film will soon be banished because we now are going to move to an adversary system with courts like the ones in Mexico State, there's a lot of things left to be done. Because if we trust the system, if we trust our survey, we have this 43% of innocents who remain in the prison system, even in the state that made the changes. And that's a huge number. So there's lots to be done, and I think we can learn a lot by getting the opinion of the users of the justice system. We can trust them to tell us all this information. I just want to close letting you know that the US inmate survey doesn't ask any of these questions that I've been talking about to the inmates. The US inmate survey does not ask them whether they're innocent. It doesn't ask them whether the judge was present. It doesn't ask them whether the system worked. In fact, the US inmate survey assumes that the justice system works. And so we're wasting a huge opportunity to learn from the users of the justice system when we keep it like that. So thank you very much. Have a good day.